outfits look and feel great, too. The house even includes a Connecticut drinking water system.
A Connecticut system in the house? We'll take it.
American Water Tech, a passion for improving lives through better water.
In life, we all have the ability to make a difference, to make an impact on someone's life. As we look around us, time never stops, but we are filled with endless moments of gratitude. The art of giving is incorporated in so many different ways. At Guam Gift Baskets, we want to be able to express your gratitude and love to those who you care about. Show your appreciation with a gift made with love this holiday season. Visit our website at guamgiftbaskets.com. See the smiles, touch their hearts, feel the experience.
Fire Navy Secretary Richard Spencer says he has a different view on the case of a Navy SEAL accused of multiple war crimes, and he will continue disciplinary plans despite President Trump's feelings.
The Pentagon and Navy Special Warfare community are still reeling from the case surrounding Navy SEAL Eddie Gallagher after the president advocated for Gallagher, who was acquitted of murder but still faced punishment for posing in a photo with a dead Iraqi militant. In a scathing op-ed, fired Navy Secretary Richard Spencer attacked the president for intervening in the case. Quote, "This was a shocking and unprecedented intervention in a low-level review. It was also a reminder that the president has very little understanding of what it means to be in the military, to fight ethically, or to be governed by a uniform set of rules and practices."
Fox's Jennifer Griffin at the Pentagon. Iraqi security forces reportedly shot and killed 40 anti-government protesters in 24 hours. The increase in casualties comes a day after demonstrators torched the Iranian consulate. The anti-government protesters say Iran is influencing Iraqi state affairs. Conor McGregor is now lined up for a return to fighting in the UFC.
The UFC is close to finalizing an on-title welterweight bout that would mark the return of Conor McGregor to the octagon. McGregor would go up against Donald Cowboy Cerrone on January 18th at T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas, a match that would headline UFC 246. The bout will mark McGregor's third appearance at 170 pounds in the UFC. He hasn't fought for the mixed martial arts body since October of last year when he lost a lightweight title bout to Khabib Nurmagomedov. McGregor has not won in the UFC since knocking out Eddie Alvarez back in November of 2016 to win his second title. Matt Napolitano, Fox News.
Several animals died in a barn fire at an Ohio wildlife park. Fire officials say 4 antelopes, 3 giraffes, and 3 hogs died at African Safari Wildlife Park in Port Clinton. The park is a drive-through wildlife park. I'm Richard Jordan, and this is Fox News.
We understand what matters to you because at Docomo Pacific, we're a family too. With the Now Family program, mom, dad, and kids stay connected on the latest devices the whole family can enjoy. For just $155 a month, get 3 lines with 30 gigs of 4G LTE data each, and endless use of your favorite apps without affecting your monthly data bucket. Add more, get more, save more. Docomo Pacific, better together. Some conditions apply.
Are you ready for some football? The Ray Gibson Show has got your fix every day with the Points NFL Pick'em contest. Get the latest updates as we check out the past week's performance and break down the upcoming action. Get your game on by calling the hotline at 888-TALK or sound off on Facebook Live at thepoint.gu. League members get a chance to win some awesome weekly prizes with a shot for your choice of a new GTA phone. The NFL Pick'em contest is brought to you by Current Guam with special thanks to GTA.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific, banking on the Pacific for 65 years.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And I got a little piece here to read. This one comes from, of all places, the WAPO, the Washington Post. And it's entitled, "In Virginia and Elsewhere, Gun Supporters Prepare to Defy New Laws." Families, church groups, hunt clubs, neighbors began arriving 2 hours early at Amelia Courthouse, Virginia, with hundreds spilling out of the little courthouse and down the hill to the street in the chilly night air. They were here to demand that the Board of Supervisors declare Amelia County a Second Amendment sanctuary, where officials will refuse to enforce any new restrictions on gun ownership. A resistance movement is boiling up in Virginia, where Democrats wrote a platform on gun control to historic victories in state elections earlier this month. The uprising is fueled by a deep cultural gulf between rural red areas that had long wielded power in Virginia and the urban and suburban communities that now dominate. Guns are the focus. Behind that, there's a sense that a way of life is being cast aside. So what's happening in Virginia is happening all over the country. If you've ever been to Virginia, some really beautiful country, some beautiful mountains, rural areas, etc. Farms. But then you get up to northeast Virginia, and it's all kind of polluted by the District of Columbia. And you've got these the suburban D.C. area that's in Virginia, and you've got this tension then between those folks and folks out in more traditional Virginia. Just like nationwide, you know, we've got the elites in the Northeast and on the left coast who think they can ignore what they call flyover country in between and figure out what's best for all of us, because they're so much more intelligent than we are and so much more moral. So what's going on in Virginia here is sort of a microcosm of what's going on nationwide. And as I've pointed out before, the whole gun rights thing is a classic example of dog whistle politics. People who've never owned a gun in their life, who are conservative, will get upset when you start talking about gun control. They hear gun control, and it's just like the dog hearing that shrill whistle that humans can't hear that causes the dog to bark and get excited because the dog thinks that someone is trying to come along and take something away from him. And it's the same way with conservatives and guns. So the phrase Second Amendment and gun rights, dog whistle politics, and it tends to separate the liberals from the conservatives. And that's what's going on here in Virginia. The article goes on to say, it mirrors a trend that began last year in western parts of the United States. Now, California is not one of the western parts of the United States. Coastal California is just kind of a suburb of the Northeast. It's connected by a couple thousand miles of America in between that both the Northeast and the coastal of California think they can ignore. It mirrors a trend that began last year in western parts of the United States, where some law enforcement officials vowed to go to jail rather than enforce firearm restrictions, and has spread eastward. In New Mexico, 25 of 33 counties declared themselves Second Amendment sanctuaries after the state expanded background checks. In Illinois, nearly two-thirds of its counties have done the same. Illinois is a really interesting place where you have a pretty good-sized state with, 15 million people or so. About half of them, though, live in the greater Chicago area. So the greater Chicago area is the gigantic dog that wags the tail called Illinois. But the folks who live in in Illinois they refer to as downstate Illinois don't particularly care for some of these things. My oath of office is to uphold the Constitution of the United States, Amelia Sheriff Ricky L. Walker said Wednesday. That's back to Virginia again, as he waited for the supervisors to meet in this rural county west of Richmond. If a judge ordered him to seize someone's guns under a law he viewed as unconstitutional, Walker said he wouldn't do it. That's what I hang my hat on, he said. Some of the unrest is fanned by gun rights groups such as the National Rifle Association and the Virginia Citizens Defense League, which have used social media and old-fashioned network to offer boilerplate language for resolutions. Now, of course, anytime the WAPO can find a reason to beat up on the NRA, they'll take it. But the movement is speaking to the anxieties of many who are unsettled by a state that has shifted from red to blue with shocking speed. All of the top leaders in the new Democrat-controlled legislature hail from urban or suburban districts in Northern Virginia, Hampton Roads, that's down around Norfolk, and Richmond. The liberal suburbs outside Washington have the largest delegation in the legislature. Poor folks in Western Virginia. We need to send a signal to Richmond about Northern Virginia. We don't want their influence to affect us down here. We're very different people, said Clay Scott, a 25-year-old construction manager whose family has lived in Amelia for generations. Democrats won control in the elections on the strength of suburban districts where gun violence was a central issue, amplified by a May 31 mass shooting at a Virginia Beach municipal building. When the General Assembly convenes in January, Governor Ralph Northam, Governor Blackface, if you don't remember that, Governor Blackface has promised to move quickly with the Democrat leaders to pass measures such as universal background checks, limits on the types and numbers of firearms that can be purchased, and a red flag law, allowing authorities to seize weapons from someone deemed a threat. Now, how would you know if someone's a threat? Well, he listened to Rush Limbaugh on the radio, and he reads things like a magazine. I saw a copy of Newsmax in his mailbox. He's one of those conservatives. You know, those folks are a threat. The proposals were essentially on the ballot in November, said Brian Moran, Northam's Secretary of Public Safety. Now, we don't know if Brian presents himself or presented himself in blackface, but be that as may, and the people have spoken through their votes. The resolutions rocketing around the Virginia countryside all have similar language. Philip Van Cleve of the Virginia Citizens Defense League said he drafted one for Amelia to consider, along with about 30 other counties out of 95 total. The matter was added to the Amelia agenda too late for it to be advertised, so by law, the board cannot vote on it until next month. Yet a crowd of 300 or more turned out after hearing about it through word of mouth. I've never seen anything like this, Van Cleve said of the ongoing interest. Everything has exploded right now. Gun owners are awake, and well, they should be. A similar resolution was passed Monday in Appomattox County, pledged to oppose any efforts to unconstitutionally restrict the right to bear arms. It said the county would do this through legal action, the power of the appropriation of public funds, and the right to petition for redress of grievances, and the direction to the law enforcement and judiciary of Appomattox County to not enforce any unconstitutional law. The concept is modeled after the sanctuary city stance that some localities have taken in response to federal immigration enforcement efforts. In those cases, local law enforcement officials declined to take voluntary steps to help the federal government detain or deport undocumented immigrants. Now, this kind of stuff has been going on actually since the beginning of the Republic. You know, if you study your American history, you'll remember Shays' Rebellion and the Whiskey Rebellion and the Hartford Resolutions and the South Carolina nullification resolutions, etc. Always this friction between a central government and perhaps some of the more rural elements as to how the country should be, how the country should manage itself. As the sanctuary movement has spread around the country, Giffords Law Center to Prevent Guns Violence found that it generally has not led to active resistance. As a practical matter, these are largely symbolic, said Adam Skaggs, Chief Counsel and Policy Director at Giffords. We haven't seen cases where there are folks that are outright defying the law. Skaggs said he says that the trends mean that authorities in such states as Washington, Oregon, Colorado, and New Mexico might be neglecting to use legal tools that could help. Here we go. Legal tools that could help prevent gun violence and suicide. While this is largely a political or symbolic gesture, I think it's quite troubling, he said. Yeah, you know, these unruly folks out there in the hinterland that don't fall in line with what their betters want them to do. They have to have their own thoughts. They can't be independent thinkers on these issues like gun control. That's dangerous. At Amelia on Wednesday night, Delegate John J. McGuire, a Republican from Henrico County, took the opportunity to show up and announce that he's seeking next year's GOP nomination to challenge U.S. Representative Abigail Spanberger. I don't understand what part of, quote, shall not infringe they don't understand, he proclaimed on the courthouse steps as the darkness settled on the throngs who couldn't get in. I'll fight my ass off for you. Now, there's a campaign speech for you. There's a campaign slogan, Real Joe Cruz. I wonder if anybody on Guam will ever pick that one up.
Maybe.
There was a guy who ran for president back in 1972 named Fred Harris. He was a Democrat from Oklahoma. And he had a very clever and very memorable slogan that I can't completely use on the air, so I'll come as close as I can. Fred Harris's campaign slogan was, "No more bull shucks."
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And, it caused a ripple with the FCC, broadcasters wondering, should we run his ads, et cetera, and worked very well. Classic case of the Barbara Streisand effect.
Yeah.
So it worked very well for Fred, but Fred, when it came down to the election, didn't draw flies. But obviously pretty memorable since I still remember it from 1972. Okay, so McGuire said, I'll fight my ass off for you. McGuire just won a second term in the House of Delegates in a nearby rural district, but he'll be in the minority now with Democrats posting a 55-45 advantage in the House and 21-19 edge in the Senate. Moran, the public safety secretary, didn't attend the Amelia meeting, but has been monitoring the phenomenon. He held town halls on gun control around the state over the summer, discussing solutions ahead of a special legislative session that Northam called in July to take up gun control bills. Republicans adjourned that session after 90 minutes, enraging Democrats and handing them a campaign issue in the fall. All of his proposals have been vetted in the court, Moran said. The courts have determined that they do not violate the Second Amendment. We feel confident that law-abiding citizens should not be concerned that their rights will be violated. But to many residents in Amelia, any kind of gun restriction feels personal. They've heard that some proposals would prevent kids under 18 from owning guns, and say people who would ban assault weapons don't understand what they are. Well, I think that's true. The average gun controller says, well, it's one of those things with a pistol grip, It's an assault weapon. That's what it looks like. Tony Easter, 60, said he learned about the proposed sanctuary resolution last week and spent 4 days driving to hunt clubs and friends' houses around the county to drum up support. My jaws are hurting from trying to explain this to people, he said. Easter grew up hunting in Amelia and has worked as a hunting and fishing guide. He's active with the NRA and raised his daughters and son in the woods. I've lived out here in the country. I'm a rural citizen. We don't agree with how Fairfax and Newport News and now even Chesterfield have dominated the state. He realizes, he said, that the people in those places see guns differently, and that he doesn't understand their circumstances any more than they understand his. But solving their problems shouldn't mean changing his way of life. What goes on in Fairfax can stay in Fairfax, Easter said. We just want to live our life the way we've been raised to live. Again and again on Wednesday night's hearing, residents rose to speak about their first shotgun, about the hours spent stalking game with father or grandfather. Yeah, it reminds me when my dad took me down to Baxter's Sports and Camera when I think it was either 11 or 12 and bought me a single-shot 22. So that wouldn't be any different from any other kid in town, you know. Everybody had at least a 22 rifle, as he dreamed about his 300 Savage deer rifle maybe when he got to be 18. Hannah Davis said she grew up hunting with her dad and eating what they killed. The only reason I'm standing here today is because I was fed wildlife, she said. Others said they feel safer in Amelia than in the city, specifically because so many people carry guns and know how to use them. And some warned of the need for protection in case of the government that goes too far. I'm a proud descendant of a revolutionary soldier that fought 4.5 years to free our land, said Troy Carter. Our forefathers bled on this very ground in Virginia for this very reason. The Second Amendment is ours. Our forefathers fought for it. I'm sending this message to Ralph Northam because Virginia is here and we are awake. Only one person out of the dozens who spoke expressed a different viewpoint. Allison Cruz rose initially to thank residents for electing her to the Piedmont Soil and Water Conservation District, but then mentioned that she is a member of Moms Demand Action and believes in sensible gun legislation. She drew light, polite applause. Afterwards, Cruz said she grew up in a family of hunters and thinks the urge to block all gun restrictions is misguided. You can lead with fear or lead with love. She said, for me, love always wins. I guess that's why Tall Tales is so successful. If we attempt to do any leading here, it's with an open heart, with an expression of love for our international radio listening audience. All right, let's see. The main thing that impressed Cruz about the public hearing, she said, was the number of people who showed up, far beyond anything she had seen in years of attending county meetings. I wish we'd see those crowds for things like water quality in the town or the school system. Amelia's supervisors will vote on a resolution December 18. The meeting has already been moved to the high school auditorium in anticipation of a big turnout. So there you go. This is one of these issues. We've got abortion, gun control. In Virginia, abortion and infanticide, by the way, if you remember the news that came out of Virginia. Assisted suicide, the desanctification of marriage. These are all wedge issues that will really, that have really divided the country and will continue to divide the country, in my mind, so long as the left continues to try to remake the country in the way it has done in the last 10 years. We've been working on this country since 1776, and now we think we can remake it all in 10 years. I don't think so. Okay, so I've got Chris here on the line. Good afternoon, Chris.
Half a day, Bob. Welcome home.
It's always good to be back, Chris.
Happy Thanksgiving.
And to you, sir.
So I saw an interesting meme. I wonder if you may have saw it while you were perusing, maybe through your Facebook, just catching up with friends. It said, Black Friday sale, 100% off or 100% savings. Stay home on Black Friday.
I like it.
So I took the advice, and so of course I always try to catch tall tales. So I stayed home, saved 100%. But I know you haven't gone to the card yet, so I'm going to see if one of these items that I'd like to talk about might be on the card. I was drawn to call you today because of the title of your show today, which is "We're in the Red on Black Friday."
Right.
So that, I'm guessing, may be a comment on the deficit.
Well, Ray is the guy that comes up with these titles for the shows, so I suspect that's it. We don't have to wait for Black Friday to determine that we're in the red. I mean, for us, every day is Black Friday if that's the criterion, right?
Sure. I'll put this out. You might either have it or you might end up in the future with it as a card item. So I read with interest today on KUAM's website, Senator Therese Talahi taking issue with mixed messages from the front office, the administration, on whether or not they will abide by the budget, which was passed, which calls for $10 million of spending on repairs at GMH after they've had a hearing today on a bill that basically, because of the administration's declaration that it's not going to give a favorable fiscal note to any of the bills that have been introduced subsequent to the budget bill, which called for Senator Therese Talahi put in the budget bill the $10 million for GMH and the now touted $27 million surplus. There has been an attempt through numerous bills to appropriate those funds. I've been wanting to have this conversation with you because I know it had been a point of contention in the past, and being the budget hawk that I know you are, there's terms of art or terms, I guess, that are used sometimes in terms of how the deficit is applied or approached in terms of accounting. And so I wanted to run this by you so that I can understand it a little bit better, because I know you're better at this than me. But a deficit, cash deficit versus an appropriation deficit, and there's a reason why I'm asking this question. So in the cumulative deficit that we have, would that be considered a cash deficit or an appropriations deficit?
I think it's a cash deficit, Chris. What that means is that we have spent, we've obligated ourselves to spend more money than what we actually have. In other words, we haven't been paying our bills.
Okay.
Whereas an appropriations deficit would be you appropriate you have $100 million worth of revenue and you appropriate 110. You haven't spent anything, but you've appropriated more than you've shown as revenue.
So I've heard it before, testified to by different fiscal folks in terms of we have a cash flow problem. We have an appropriation at this level, but we've got reserves and we're only spending at this level. So if we spent more than we took in, is it that the bills are simply piling up? Is it a quantified amount in terms of what's owed, in terms of the what we didn't pay?
That's my understanding, yeah.
Okay. Because the reason why I guess I'm asking that question is that while it may seem prudent, and I'm sure it is, to use surpluses as if what turns out to be after all of the books are closed and completely audited, which I believe happens sometimes in June, if it turns out that that is the correct situation, then the $27 million, if it turns out to be that surplus applied directly to the deficit, then would disallow that $10 million that was appropriated in the budget for GMH.
Well, that I think you're talking more in terms of statutory construction than you are talking finance. But let's start out with the $27 million. If there were no appropriations of the $27 million, then according to Lou, what she wants to do with it is she wants to pay all those unpaid bills that have been stacking up, right?
Right.
Now, if there's an appropriation on the books that would appropriate some of that money, the way I understand this area of the law is that we're just not going to be able to pay $10 million worth of those bills.
Okay.
So when Lou said that, I thought, that's the way it should be. Now, I understand all of the urgencies that we have, but if we're always going to be spending money that way, we'll always be in a hole, and we'll get to the point where no one's going to want to even do business with us if we're not there already.
Right. And the reason why I'm going down that road is I think the legislature's oversight, and I think from what I've been hearing from people, is their uneasiness and actual just outright being upset about the priorities that have been being set by the government as of late, and with this new administration and legislature coming in, is exactly that, spending on the priorities. And so my point is, if the legislature is going to say the bills that they've introduced to appropriate the surpluses, and many of them do go towards priorities, but if it were the administration's decision to straight up go and spend and pay down on the deficit, I think the legislature then should turn its attention towards, we want to see a list of those bills paid to ensure that that surplus doesn't go to any other appropriation authority that the administration may have for any pet projects or anything that would be outside of simply paying down the deficit.
It's a good idea, yeah. A little accountability.
I think that's where I would turn my attention, because, I mean, even if you look towards how they would pay down on the deficit, if it was, once again, at the hospital, meaning, vendors that have gone unpaid, in public safety where there's, need for more equipment, in education where, they've received shortfalls in the past in terms of debt obligations that they've had. I believe, that the superintendent was asking, for revenue from that surplus for their deficit from last year. So, maybe it is a better idea if it comes down to it, as you said, where it's already structured, because I think the hospital should get the $10 million. Obviously, it really needs it. But beyond that, if there is no fiscal notes being issued that show the willingness or the acceptance of the administration to support the subsequent bills that were introduced, if I were chairing a finance committee, I'd say fine. So I want a list of those bills that we're going to pay so that we can show the people that we're using their money wisely.
Good idea, Chris. So I think probably on Monday I'll have an item on the card called Therese Terlahi versus Lou LG, and we can explore this a little bit, okay?
Sounds great. Just wanted to spend a little time on my Black Friday with you. Have a great weekend.
Thank you, Chris. And James, I see you there. We're going to have to take a short break. When we come back from the break, we're going to come back to James.
Ever notice how that one perfect holiday gift is just out of reach? Or how sales on the stuff you want all come at the same time? This season, plan ahead with a holiday loan from First Hawaiian Bank. Now you can afford to be nice without being naughty. For more details, visit FHB.com or any branch to apply. Additional restrictions apply. First Hawaiian Bank, member FDIC, equal housing lender.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Mescla. Try their featured special for November. Crispy pork belly strips served over lightly battered brioche, raspberry demi-glaze, and topped with maple syrup. That's the pork belly and French toast. Visit Mescla in Agotya and now in Tumon at the Grand Plaza Hotel. For reservations, please call 969-2652.
GRMC's Neuroscience and Neurology Department treats a wide spectrum of disorders associated with the nervous system, spine, and brain. Some of the more common disorders include seizures, epilepsy, dementia, sleep disorders, migraine, and stroke, which is one of the leading causes of death on Guam. GRMC's neuroscience team is equipped with the latest technology and the finest neurological doctors. To make an appointment, contact GRMC Specialty Clinics at 645-5500.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by American Water Tech, a passion for improving lives through better water.
Now, more Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie. Spitting truth like watermelon seeds at a summer picnic. Call now, 888-TALK, 888-8255.
Well, it's 888-8255, and James, you figured it out, so you're on the air right now. How you doing?
I'm doing all right, Bob. How about you? Good for you to be back. Glad to have you back, bud.
It's always good to get home, James.
Yep, no place like home,
yep.
Especially for the holidays.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, and I'm going to qualify this by giving you a little bit of background on me. I'm an educated person. I hold a double master's degree and a bachelor's degree in several different areas of engineering. And I'm former military and law enforcement. And my family lineage, I can trace it all the way back to the Revolutionary War. And my family has always been military and or law enforcement. So I think you kind of know where I'm going with this. But as far as where we're at right now with all of the calls for gun controls, gun bans, confiscations, quote unquote, turn-ins, if, a mandatory buyback, that's nothing but that's just confiscation. So with regards to all of these that are coming up, popping up, and here again, I'm going to qualify this with a tidbit before I ask you what your take on this is. If you sit down and analytically, and I'm not talking about the knee-jerk response, reaction, oh my God, we had a shooting, we have to do something, we can't let this happen again. If you sit down and you look at this analytically, level-headedly with common sense, you'll see that overall murder in the United States is down. You'll see that literally there's more people that die in 1 month of obesity than are killed in 24 months of gun-related violence. You will see that according to the FBI, according to the Center for Disease Control, if you take suicide out of the equation, which is a mental illness, the numbers of people that die every year in the United States due to gun violence is less than the number of people that are killed in 2 months in alcohol-related and drug-related DUI accidents. So, and this is not, don't take my word for it, this is all verifiable information according to our own FBI, our own Center for Disease Control, and the National Bureau of Statistics. Okay, so I'm not asking anybody to take anybody's word for this. But if you sit down and you look at just those few things that I've mentioned, and there's dozens more that fold into the equation, why do we have so many people standing up like Moms Demand Rights and all of these folks? And these are, and here again, I'm an educated man. These are folks that are supposed to be educated folks, most of them that have run for office and are holding some type of a political office are attorneys. And they do not understand what shall not be infringed means. even if you put the Webster's Dictionary definition in front of their face. What is your take on why this is happening? I'd like to know what you think.
Okay, well, very well posed question, James, and I've seen references to most of the figures that you mentioned, and I think you're right on point there. The difference between some of these things is, for instance, the number of people who die from obesity hasn't been sensationalized the way someone who dies from gun violence has been sensationalized. But it comes down, once again, to this fundamental dichotomy as to how people think a country should be run. There are people called conservatives who start out with the proposition that there are certain immutable aspects of life that won't be changed, that must be dealt with, and that the best way for us to deal with them, and these are things like scarcity, is for men, meaning men and women, to be free and to not be hampered by an overly powerful government. That we subscribe to these immutable principles, things like the Ten Commandments, the Bill of Rights. Almost every civilization that's come along has arrived at pretty much the same ideas at the beginning. But then there's another group of people who say, no, that's not right. You know, that was okay back in the 1700s, but we're so much smarter now, and we're so much more scientific. And we know so much better, so much more about how a government should operate and how people should behave. So that first group says, you know, well, man is not born good, but he will behave under the right circumstances. The left says, man can be made better by government. So the conservative says it's the job of the government to secure and protect the rights of individual freedom for citizens. The left says the job of the government is to make people's lives better. And once you sign up for the second one, which includes large amounts of behavior modification, it can take you all over the place. And right now, one of the first definitions is gun control. And my fear is that, you know, that slippery slope, if we start sliding down the slippery slope and give up to the gun control advocates, there'll be no end to how far we slide and how our individual rights are eroded. So the piece that I read dealing with Virginia, I think pretty well describes that in common terms, that the lefties in the cities, the D.C. suburbs, want to change the way we've been doing things for our entire history. That's my not so short answer, James.
Well, and I think I agree with you 150% on all those points. I'm going to throw a couple of other little things in here that some people might want to think about that are listening. I believe that the way that our children have been taught in school, I believe the way that our young adults have been and are currently being taught in college, you know, all of the isms, and I don't know why it is that it seems like a lot of thing that ends with ism ends up being a bad thing. Yeah. Fascism, communism, socialism, okay, all of those isms, I believe that there is an indoctrination, and I believe it's been very, very effective. And I believe a lot of, you know, the quote-unquote common average American, the quote-unquote, you know, silent majority has been exactly that. They've been putting up with it and putting up with it and putting up with it. And I think the young folks that are coming up now that are going to eventually end up being our elected leaders have been brainwashed, okay? And I've been around the world, okay? I have lived, worked, and operated with folks on almost every continent. And I actually, for the first time, had one of my college-age daughter's friends actually hint to me the other day that I was racist.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a racist because I believe that everyone should have the right to keep and bear arms. I'm a racist because I believe that everyone should have the right to freedom of speech, okay? And you mentioned that slippery slope a minute ago.
Sure.
That slope, we're already sliding down that slope because I'm hearing so many of these young college-age kids making comments along the lines of, oh, well, the Constitution, you know, that thing's old, it's outdated, that thing doesn't make any difference to us anymore, that it doesn't have any bearing on the, as one of my daughter's friends said the other day, the here and the now. And see, that slope that you're talking about has already started. If we no longer have the right to protect ourselves, and I'm going to tell you right now, as a former law enforcement officer, and I haven't looked it up in probably a year or so, but the last time that I pulled the information on it, the FBI says that the average police response time is 14 minutes. Now, until they can guarantee me, and even if they could guarantee me that I could literally carry a police officer around in my back pocket, and that I could have a police officer sit in my living room with all of the number of home invasions that we're having these days, especially with they're targeting some of the elderly, and my mother is 85, and she lives right here in Manila. Okay? I'm scared. But until they can do something to bring the crime rate down to almost zero, I feel like I need my constitutional rights, okay? Because if it takes 14 minutes for a police officer to show up, it only takes 30 seconds for someone to be killed in a violence act. And that's a matter of fact. That's not my word. That's not a feeling or an opinion. 30 seconds is how long it takes for the average robbery or mugging suspect to be killed. Now, these young folks, they think that the Constitution is old and outdated and it needs to be stricken and rewritten. You know, it's not a smorgasbord. You don't get to pick and choose. It was written for a reason by some people that were so much smarter and so much more common sense level-headed than we are in this day and time. Everybody needs to take a pause and sit down and look at this for what it really is and apply common sense here.
Hey, James, I'm really glad you called, and I can't say I disagree with anything, and welcome to the Tall Tales Posse. And it is indeed time to take a pause. I got to take a break. So,
okay. Thanks, Bob. I appreciate it.
Thanks for calling.
Hey, what's that?
A Subway Big Hot Pastrami?
My Big Hot Pastrami?
No, my Subway Big Hot Pastrami. Get your own.
Get your own Subway Big Hot Pastrami. Tender, juicy beef on freshly baked sunflower crunch bread, topped with pickles and mustard. Finish off your meal with all new seasoned potato wedges, baked to perfection right in the restaurant. Both available for a limited time only. Subway, make it what you want.
The holidays are upon us. As we prepare for Christmas, the season of giving, we can lend a hand to families in recovery. On November 30th from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., Togi will host a car wash to raise funds for their annual Sweet Child of Mine event. Bring your vehicles to Lighthouse Recovery Center in Tizen and drop a monetary donation of your choice. Your donation will help those in recovery mend relationships with their children, especially during this time of year. Get your car washed on November 30 from 10 to 2 and support Togi.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific. Banking on the Pacific for 65 years.
So here we are back again on Tall Tales. Had a good call there from James, who's certainly on the right wavelength here with the Tall Tales philosophy. And one thing I would point out, James, I'd agree with you 100% on the indoctrination of folks who are in our various educational institutions. I don't know if you've been listening for a long time, but from time to time I go into the phenomenon of neo-Marxism, also referred to as cultural Marxism, and the Frankfurt School. And I'll just do a little update on that, and I think it really explains the whole indoctrination thing here. Now, I have a hat rack at home, and most of the hats on the hat rack have an eagle, globe, and anchor on them. I don't have a tinfoil hat on my hat rack, but you're going to say, you know, there will be those on the left who'll say, oh, yeah, that guy needs a tinfoil hat. But there was a group of intellectuals in Frankfurt, Germany, in the 1920s. They were Marxists. And they thought that the Russian Revolution was going to be the beginning of a Marxist utopia in the world. And the Russian Revolution was supposed to spread throughout Europe and around the rest of the world. Capitalism was to be overthrown. We would have a dictatorship of the proletariat. We would have socialism everywhere, and everyone would live so well that we'll wonder why it took us so long to get there. And this utopia was to begin with the workers, where the workers of the world would unite because they had nothing to lose but their chains. And the workers would unite, workers of all countries would unite to overthrow their capitalist oppressors. Well, when World War I came along, we found that the German workers didn't unite with French workers. They shot at them. And the Frenchmen shot back. So this whole workers of the world unite thing didn't work at all during World War I. So the guys at the Frankfurt School said, we got to stop and regroup here. We're not going to get there through a workers' violent revolution. What we've got to do is work on the intellectuals in society, and we've got to soften up the democratic socialist, as your democratic capitalist countries of the world, through their educational institutions. We've got to change the way colleges approach things and the way high schools, etc. And by taking over the institutions of democratic countries and turning them towards Marxism, we will ultimately prevail. And that's what they've been doing. And the first shot in the United States was the 60s, where you saw a guy named Herbert Marcuse, if you remember back then, who was one of the Frankfurt School guys. He was still alive. He was one of the patron saints of the revolutionary 1960s, where we saw university administrations shamed and cast aside, etc. And we saw anarchy on college campuses, and everyone embraced this new way of thinking, which was not very well described, neo-Marxism. And now it's very difficult for a youngster to go to college and actually get an education. Kids go to college and they wind up taking all kinds of, you mentioned the word ism, seemed like everything with ism on the end is bad. Well, in college curriculums, everything with the word studies on the end of it is bad. Like when I first heard there was a course called American Studies, I thought, oh, man, that'd be interesting. I wish they'd have had that when I was going to college. I'd have taken that. I figured, you know, American Studies would be American history, the Constitution, the Revolution. No, it's not. American Studies is what a horrible country the United States has been, the horrible things that America has done throughout the world. So these different kinds of studies, and what they really are is it's critical studies. Critical studies is a term of art, meaning no matter what it is that you're looking at, you find out who the oppressor and who the oppressed is, and you lend all your efforts to helping the oppressed overcome the oppressor. We got some of that right here on Guam. So you're absolutely right that people who go to school now, even public schools, even grade schools, are subject to this brainwashing, where little Johnny, or when little Johnny is in first grade, he might find out that the reading book is called Hannah Has Two Mommies. So exposed to all of this gaslighting that's part of the neo-Marxist approach to take institutions that we thought we could always rely on and now determine that really they were false. We used to think there were only two sexes. There were men and what's the other one? Real Joe Cruz? Women. Yeah, men and women. We know better than that now.
I forget.
Yeah, we know better than that now. And we used to think that, when a child was born, we would know instantly whether See, there I go again. We would know what sex they were. But now we know that there's no sense even asking until the kid is somewhere in his early teens, because they may not have decided what sex they are. These are not independent, screwy events. This is all part of the same framework. It's cultural Marxism, neo-Marxism, and the beginning of it all was the Frankfurt School back in the 1920s. Now, these intellectuals at the Frankfurt School at the time were all Jewish. This is not to say that there's an anti-Semitic or a Semitic dimension to this, but when Hitler came along, they all packed up in 1933 when Hitler was elected and got out of Germany. And they wound up in universities in the United States, primarily Columbia University. So, James, I've talked about this quite a bit in the past, and I'll be talking about it again in the future. But for now, we've got that big halftime show coming up with the cheerleaders, the marching bands, etc. And then I'm going to come back to the card. First item on the card is the Adjutant General of the Guard versus Anonymous. So hang on tight.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Ready, set, shop. I'm Richard Jordan, Fox News. Black Friday kicks off the shortest holiday shopping season in 6 years with 6 fewer days than last year. But still, holiday sales are expected to rise.
The National Retail Federation predicts roughly a 4% increase in retail sales compared to last year. So that equates roughly to $730 billion extra dollars just this holiday season alone. And there's even more optimism in the air. You've got Deloitte, Alex Partners that are predicting sales could increase up to 5%.
Fox's Christina Partsenevelis. A fire continues to burn a day after 2 massive explosions at a chemical plant in Port Neches, Texas, east of Houston. The blast blew out windows and doors of nearby homes. Troy Monk is the plant's director of health, safety, and security.
Our job right now is to try to contain the fire. We want to try to minimize the area of impact, and we want to try to minimize the fire's impact to adjacent equipment.
A 4-mile radius is under a mandatory evacuation order affecting more than 50,000 people. President Trump made a surprise Thanksgiving visit to American troops in Afghanistan, where he spoke about restarting peace negotiations with the Taliban.
This was a very stealthy mission. I've never seen such a mission. Usually it's a sort of open secret when a president flies to a war zone, but this was a very, very close hold. Only a few people at the White House knew about it. His chief of staff, Mick Mulvaney, traveled with him, as did Stephanie Grisham, the spokesman. He also had Robert O'Brien, the national security advisor, on board with him, and John Barrasso, the senator from Wyoming. But it was a very small group, and very few people knew about it.
Fox's Jennifer Griffin at the Pentagon. Former Japanese Prime Minister Yasuhiro Nakasone has died. Nakasone presided over Japan at the pinnacle of its economic success and was known to have a warm relationship with former President Ronald Reagan. He was 101. America's listening to Fox News.
When you think about better water, think Kinetico softened water. Kinetico water conditioners work like no other, supplying a continuous flow of luxuriously soft water without disruption and without use of electricity. After all, better water flows from better thinking. Kinetico.
American Water Tech, a passion for improving lives through better water. Call American Water Tech at 649-2301 or email info@americanwatertech.com.
'Tis the season to be feasting. Indulge the fun way at Sandalo Club's Donut Dash 2K 5K on Saturday, November 30 at Teasen Complex. Race starts at 6 a.m. There will be cash prizes, and the first 300 finishers get a free coffee mug, perfect for dunking those donuts you will get when you register. The more donuts you eat, the better you'll do. The Donut Dash registration fee is $15. Register online at guamdonutdash.eventbrite.com or call 488-9028. A portion of the proceeds will benefit the Guam Police Department.
British police standing by a decision to drop an investigation involving claims of sex trafficking and a senior member of the royal family.
Police here confirming they received a complaint 4 years ago from an American woman who said she'd been trafficked to England by the late American paedophile Jeffrey Epstein. Virginia Roberts-Dufresne says she had sex with Britain's Prince Andrew 3 times, including in London, beginning in 2001 when she was 17. Andrew denies those claims. London's Metropolitan Police saying it stands by its decision to drop the case because it was largely focused on activities outside the UK. In London, Simon Owen, Fox News.
Major storms expected across the U.S. Friday and likely to impact many travelers returning from the holiday weekend. The National Weather Service predicts heavy mountain snow and high winds across much of the West, moving over the Rockies and bringing blizzard conditions through Saturday night. People in Alaska suffering damage to their cars with a rather curious suspect.
A couple of vehicle break-ins in an airport parking lot in Alaska, and it was a bear. Thousands of dollars in damage done to one car. Alyssa Bredesen says she parked her car for 2 days at the lot and returned to find a caved-in roof, broken window, ripped seats, and muddy bear prints and fur covering the car. There have been 5 reports of bears going to vehicles in Kodiak since the beginning of the year. Alaska wildlife troopers are investigating whether the break-ins are the work of a single repeat offender, or one trooper noting, we live in a place where we have to be more aware of bears breaking in than humans. John Saucier, Fox News.
Mississippi State got the last laugh against rival Ole Miss Thursday. Ole Miss wide receiver Elijah Moore received a penalty for excessive celebration after lifting his leg like a dog in the end zone. The 15-yard penalty put kicker Luke Logan at the 35-yard line for the extra point, which he missed. Mississippi State took the victory 21-20. I'm Richard Jordan, and this is Fox News.
As the busy holiday season approaches, the last thing on your mind is to visit your medical provider. At American Medical Center, we put your health first. A preventative visit will ensure a healthy holiday season. Call 647-8262, and together we can address any concerns you may have and make certain all your medications are current. From our family to yours, happy holidays from American Medical Center, your partner in healthcare.
Hafa-Day Tritons, this is Chelsea St-Nicholas, president of the UOG Alumni Association. I made some of the best memories during my time as a Triton. Because of this, I have committed to giving back to the G is for Giving campaign, which will help student scholarships, programs, and activities. And I encourage you all to do the same. To make a tax-deductible donation, log on to give.uog.edu by December 31st or call 735-2957.
Viva UOG!
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific, banking on the Pacific for 65 years.
What a terrific show, especially the finale with the great Tall Tales Orchestra, the Tall Tales barrage of cannon fire. This doesn't get any better than that. I'm inspired every day. I listen to it every day, but every day that I listen to it, I'm a little bit more inspired. The Tall Tales halftime show. Okay, so the first hour then was pretty much taken up with the Second Amendment. I had a couple of good calls, Chris and James. I've got a short but interesting card today. I've got Tag versus Anonymous. I've got Marsh versus Alexander Teitler. I've got Janela versus Black Friday. And I've got Tello versus the Organic Act. But, of course, before I go to the card, I've got to finish Zemi Ikotny, Meet the Press. Where's Real Joe Cruz when I need him to press that button to play the overture from Meet the Press? Well, I'll have him do it when he comes back in, even if it cuts into my... Yeah, here we go again. Let's try this again. So now it's time for Zemi Ikotny. Hey, very good, Real Joe Cruz. Right on cue. I only had to cue it twice. Yeah, so read the press. Our candidate, Zemi Ikotny, Press the Meet, our bilingual play on words for Meet the Press, where we examine the editorials of the two daily newspapers and check how many mistakes they made today, and then try to figure out which of the two were the better. But I've got a little different angle today, so you're going to want to pay a little bit of attention here. As if you don't always pay a lot of attention to this portion of the program. Well, we start out with the daily news. So as Gomer Pyle would say, the Daily News didn't run an editorial today. They just ran something from USA Today. Surprise, surprise. And what is the subject of the piece that they took for USA Today? It's Trump bashing. So no need to spend a whole lot of time on the Daily News. They have a portion of their paper that they call the editorial page, but I don't think they've had a real editorial there now for what, a month, Real Joe Cruz?
I believe so.
It's been a long time. So right now the score is Post 155, Daily News 55. So the Post is 100 stars ahead of the Daily News, and the Daily News seems to have dropped out of the game. No local editorials at all. And then we have the Post. Recent storm highlights the slow smothering of our corals. On Wednesday morning, many of us woke up thankful the tropical storm Kamuri didn't leave our island with a trail of devastation. Except for some flooding, downed trees, and pocket power outages, we were generally okay. The same cannot be said of our coral reefs and the marine ecosystem that gives us fish and beautiful underwater sights for us and our tourists to enjoy. Our waters are usually turquoise and sparkle in the sun. On Wednesday, our coastal waters turned murky brown. Mud flowed into our beautiful beach waters because of the lack of an adequate system to catch and filter the runoff before the excess rain runs into the ocean. This lack of an effective drain and catchment system could one day leave our children's children and the generations after them with no more beautiful undersea wonders to see. This problem could one day give our tourists less reason to visit. The runoff adds to the strain to our corals and could have gone on for years because of the rising sea temperatures. Some corals have survived while a majority have died. And on and on. The same thing about, we're not taking good enough care of our reefs. And the last couple paragraphs It's a lot to ask for a community as you were paying for effective drain and catchment system, keep mud and chemicals from smothering our corals will not come cheap. The cost could be in the millions of dollars. That's a lot for a community that can't even prioritize fixing its broken one and only Guam Memorial Hospital or replace rundown schools. So there are a lot of choices our elected officials need to make on where the budget, close to $1 billion a year, paid in part with the help of the federal government, should be spent. Okay, well, good point. Dealing with the budget, et cetera. I mean, dealing with the coral reefs and once again, our cacistocratic approach to government, where we know these things are going on, but since they don't immediately affect us, we tend to let it go and spend money on stuff that's more fun. Does Festback ring a bell? Okay, now here's something new for today. Yesterday, one of our posters, I think it might have been part of the Triple J outfit, James Howard, asked if I could give Candid News a blue star. And I had to explain, well, the blue star only goes to editorials. And so far, the only places that we could find editorials would be in the 2 daily newspapers, although that's gotten pretty hard, really. The only place we find editorials now is in 1 daily newspaper. And I said that Candid was coming up with some really good stuff. The thing about Janella Carrera taking non-existent comp time and being on the payroll when she was away from her office was some real Watergate-style journalism, and I really appreciated that. But the blue star goes to editorials and editorial comment, and I hadn't seen that much editorial comment on Candid up until now. And then if they were to go into that, well, yeah, then maybe I'd think about it. Well, that was yesterday. Guess what I found today? Editorial, What the Taxpayers Didn't Save This Black Friday by Troy Torres.
Nice.
Yeah. So I don't know if Troy was listening yesterday or if sometimes great minds arrive at the same destination simultaneously without coordinating with one another. But anyhow, here's what Troy said. Governor Lilian Guerrero decided to break the gubernatorial tradition of declaring Black Friday a holiday this year. She said the decision was a matter of fiscal responsibility. GovGuam employees, therefore, need to report to work as usual today. If you want to take the day off, go shopping, you'll need to sign for annual leave. Unlike the vacations Ms. Leon Guerrero's Director of Communications, Janella Carrera, took. The last public estimates placed the price tag of a public holiday declaration at around $800,000. I think it was $812,000 that the Director of Administration at that time came up with as the figure. I think it's actually a lot more than that, because when the government shuts down, much of commerce comes to a stop. A lot of things that business people want to do can't be done because essential government agencies aren't open. So it costs the government, it costs you and me a lot of money to shut that government down. And, last Thanksgiving, Governor Eddie Calvo, lame duck, on his way out, took one more last chance to cause people to say, ooh, I really liked Eddie Calvo when he was governor because he gave us a day off after Thanksgiving. He was good. A little bit of pandering to the public, pandering to the government employees. So it was what I referred to as a surprise holiday. So we didn't have a surprise holiday today. And on Wednesday, I said, well, it looks like we're not going to have to deal with that this year. So that was good. So going back to the Candid editorial, but if this decision truly were about saving money, one could question the governor's hiring spree leading up to Black Friday. Ms. Leon Guerrero just hired 2 deputy directors for small agencies. Adrian Cruz will be the Deputy Director of Agriculture, and Michelle Lastimosa will be the Deputy Director of the Environmental Protection Agency. Together, they will pull a ballpark figure of nearly $200,000 in salary and benefits. Then there's Miss Leon Guerrero's recently hired Policy Director, Carlo Branch, who is paid $105,485 in salary and benefits, over $100,000. Some positions recently filled aren't so obvious, such as the $77,034.23 Special Projects Coordinator hired at the Agency for Human Resources Development Director's Office. Another $77,000. On her staff, the governor has retained the services of 2 counsels, one of whom is her son-in-law, Haig Huyen, who does not even have a full license to practice on Guam. He's paid $160,511.23 in salary and benefits. I don't know if this is true or not, but I heard that the governor's son-in-law, Mr. Haig Huyen, is in charge of the anti-nepotism division of the government of Guam. You think that's right, real Joe Cruz?
That's very possible, sir.
Yeah. Okay. Governor Leon Guerrero's recent hiring decisions cost taxpayers about $500,000. When you add in the $400,000 she wants to use to pay the airfare and accommodations for 100 people to go to Festpac in Hawaii, she clearly has outpaced the cost of a public holiday and erased any notion of fiscal responsibility. It would be more correct for the governor to state that she could not declare Black Friday a public holiday because she already spent that money on salaries and travel costs. These examples of runaway spending in the Leon Guerrero administration are just the tip of the iceberg in demonstrating her administration's true fiscal policy, her own travel costs, the price tag of executive security detail and travel with her, contracts for services, and her hiring spree that challenges the shopping sprees happening today, tell the story of a banker governor who is not as committed to fiscal austerity as she says she is. The math on this administration's funding or handling of government finances becomes fuzzier and fuzzier as the administration ages. Spending is one thing, tax overpayments and taxation are another. Shoppers this morning may notice that the sales this Black Friday may not be as joyous as they were in years past. Inflation may be one thing, but the governor's beloved 25% increase in the business privilege tax more likely is to blame for the burden on shoppers. And you'll recall that when the governor was asked, well, when can we go back, when can we repeal that 1% increase? How long do you think it should last? The governor's answer was, forever. This is not a tall tale. That's actually what she said. She wants that to stay in place forever. So if the government has that much more money flowing from the single largest revenue stream under its belt, and the governor is tightening the flow of cash from that belt, then why haven't all the tax refunds been paid yet? So that was an editorial from the Candid News, which is not a print newspaper. It hasn't been around for a long, long time like the Daily News has. I suppose that, yeah, okay. Well, I'm going to put this aside for the moment here. And let's see, I think it was Wednesday when I had this guy on the phone. I said, Pete, we ought to repeat this on Friday. And Pete, let's repeat our conversation, okay?
Yes, sir. How are you today?
I'm really, really good.
Well, I've only caught bits and pieces of the conversations in the different various media about the surplus, and it made me wonder. Well, surplus, first of all, I don't think that's the right word. We have an overage of revenue collection, but surplus means that our bills are all paid and we got extra money.
One would think so, Pete, yeah.
Yeah, but I got a question about how they handle those overages of collections, because isn't it a basic principle that the legislature appropriates all funds? And if there is an overage of collections, the executive can't just decide how to spend it. It has to go through the legislature. Am I wrong on that?
I think you got a good point there. So let's take an example. Let's say that the legislature anticipates $100 million worth of revenue, and the appropriations in the budget bill are $100 million. And when the taxes are collected, the government collects $120 million. So there's a $20 million, you'd say, collection overage, what they call a surplus. Can the governor just go and spend that surplus? I'd say no. It has to be appropriated.
I mean, the governor wants to spend it on paying bills. That's fine, but the legislature says go pay the bills, not the governor deciding what to do with it, right?
I think that's a real good point, Pete. Yeah.
Okay, I just thought that's like a very basic principle of government, and I didn't hear anybody talking about that.
Well, I'm glad you called, and if we stop to think about it, you know, a nefarious finance chairman in the legislature would do this. He'd say, well, I really think we can collect $150 million, but I'm only going to anticipate $100 million. We'll appropriate $100 million, and we'll let the governor spend the other $50 million however she wants. I don't think that's the law. So very good point, Pete. I'm glad you called in.
All right. Well, I, too, practiced the 100% savings of Black Friday and slept in instead.
Well, you've really capitalized on Black Friday. You got a good morning sleep, and you're listening to the top-rated afternoon FM radio talk show in the Western Pacific. So you've done it right, Peter.
All right. Thanks again.
Okay, so long. So, yeah, I'm winding up here on Zemi Ikotny. So I suppose that guy, you know, the guy sitting over there in the lazy boy chair, the smart money, the guy that knows everything, knows the answer to all the questions. He's over there probably mumbling, "Well, candidate and legitimate media. It's not like the Daily News where you can go down and buy it at King's Restaurant. I don't know how they could be recognized as having an editorial." And the answer is, it's pretty easy when the Daily News abandons the field. And people who like to read editorials, if you can't read one where it ought to be, are going to go out looking for them in other places. So the Candid News guys, Troy Torres and Johnny Rosario, are pretty good at what they do. So I don't know what their thought process was, but, you know, I could say them thinking, well, if you're not going to do a Daily News, we will. And they wrote it, and it's a really good editorial. My only fear is that the Daily News will come along and snap them up and put them on the staff. So without further ado, I have examined the Daily News, which gets a 0 for today, as usual. I've examined the Post editorial, okay editorial, not Blue Star quality. And then we have a newcomer to the field. Do we have a drum roll there, Real Joe Cruz? A drum roll. The coveted Blue Star goes to Candid News. Talk about unprecedented. This is like a, this is like a rookie being called up to the majors, and in his first game, he hits a bases-loaded home run. Very good, Candid News. Good editorial. Good job. Okay, so we move from there onto the card. And I start out with Tag versus Anonymous. And I suppose I'm going to have to confess error here. You'll see what mistake I made in dealing with what I thought was a really bad decision, or a group of bad decisions on the part of the Tag, and the way I handled it. So there's a story in both the Post and the Daily News about a Guam soldier denies second rape allegation. A guy named Jason Susuiko was accused of sexually abusing a 12-year-old girl. He pleaded not guilty. And then he was indicted earlier this month on charges of first-degree criminal sexual conduct as a first-degree felony and 2 counts of second-degree sexual conduct as a first-degree felony. So he's got a couple of criminal sexual conduct charges pending against him. Now, earlier, there was a similar situation, and Susuiko was in the Guard. He is a recruiter for the Guard, I believe. He's a full-time guardsman. And earlier this year, there was another guardsman in the same situation, criminal charges pending against him, and his name was Guerrero, Sergeant Jerry Guerrero. And both Susuiko and Guerrero were kept on the job. And, you've heard me talk about this before. In fact, I talked about it just on Wednesday, that pending criminal charges are not a job protection program. We talked about how the university kept a Professor Ellert on the program, on the payroll, for like a year after he'd been credibly accused of sexually abusing students. Then we've got this guy who's under indictment right now, who retired. We gave him a contract. And we had Ovita Nauta, who stole money from the police department and was indicted and stayed on the job at the police department, transferred to the Department of Corrections, pled guilty to stealing money from the police department and trying to repay it with a bounced check. And you know what happened to her? Nothing. She got kudos from Tony Leon Guerrero, Tony Lamarina, the Director of Corrections. She should have been fired. And then we've got the two women at the Department of Public Health and Social Services who were caught in defecations in their own programs, charged criminally, their criminal cases pinned, and instead of firing them, the director moved them out of their positions into other jobs, probably make-work jobs, So when this matter came up with Jerry Guerrero, I chattered about it on Tall Tales, and I threatened to download the software in my nasty letter machine, which I did, and I wrote a letter dated July 25 to Major General Esther Agagi, which I'm going to read for you now. Dear Adjutant General Agagi, quote, there is no tolerance for depraved conduct such as the sexual exploitation of minors in the Guam National Guard. We will continue to work closely with law enforcement to root out predators and protect the island's youth. End of quote. That's and then back to my letter. That's what you told the Daily News on July 9. Actually, you have shown not only tolerance but deference to Sergeant Jerry Guerrero, whose reported misconduct is indeed depraved. As per the Daily News, police in April 2018 found that Guerrero recorded videos of the pair having sex, and officers got a search warrant for Guerrero's cell phone, documents state. Guerrero was charged with electronic enticement of a child as a first-degree felony, 4 counts of third-degree criminal sexual conduct, all as second-degree felonies, and 3 counts of possession of child pornography as second-degree felonies. Although Guerrero was charged in local court, there was no judgment in that case, and as of Monday, Guerrero was still employed with the Guam National Guard, said Major Josephine Blas, public affairs officer for the Guam National Guard. A person, and then this is what Blas said, a person is innocent until proven guilty, and the local case had not been resolved, so Guerrero remained employed with the Guard, Blas said. Yeah. Major Blas directly contradicts you, General Agagi. And then here's from KOAM. If there's no judgment against him, then the Guard can't take a judgment. Even our Constitution says innocent until proven guilty, Blas told KOAM. And I've got a footnote here. The phrase, quote, innocent until proven guilty appears nowhere in the Constitution, including its amendments. In fact, even the words innocent and guilty are absent. Blas's crackpot interpretation of the Constitution rather than describing a position of no tolerance of depraved conduct such as sexual exploitation of minors, apparently underlies a policy of enablement. KOAM again. Even today, Guerrero maintains his employment. Major Blas says the Guard stands strongly by his innocence until proven guilty. Even though Guerrero's conduct was the feature of extended media coverage a year ago and currently he's still on the job at the Guard, you hypocritically virtue signal, quote, no tolerance for a depraved conduct. 10 GCA 63723.60 would seem to give you all the authority you need to demonstrate that there really is, quote, no tolerance for depraved conduct such as sexual exploitation of minors in the National Guard. If there is a reason that Guerrero is still employed by the Guard, you owe it to the public in general and Guardsmen in particular to clearly state that reason rather than hiding behind your spokesperson's nonsensical statements. So that's a letter I wrote in July. Now, the story that ran in today's paper winds up, after going through the rest of the stuff, the Guam National Guard confirmed the military is initiating personnel actions and separation proceedings to let go of Susuiko. Well, about time. I'm going to do a little coughing standing up here because it's time for the 7th inning stretch.
Did you know that home loan rates have plunged again? Would you like to take advantage of these lower rates to help lower your monthly payments? Refinancing doesn't have to be for another 30 years. It can be for 10, 15, or 20 years. It's up to you. Reduce your monthly payments. Pay off your loan earlier. At Bank Pacific, where we're open to closing your loan in a hurry.
Bank Pacific, where others put branches, we place roots.
Equal housing lender. Credit conditions apply.
Here at The Point, we're thankful for a lot of things.
Our awesome sponsors.
An island brimming full of people with pride and passion.
And a perfect place to do business.
But when we reflect on it,
we're most thankful to have you listening.
And this seemed like a good time to let you know. We hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving.
And thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening to 93.3 The Point.
So here we are, 7th inning stretch, center field bleachers, Wrigley Field, Chicago. One of the interesting parts of Tall Tales is our our daily celebration of the seventh inning stretch. So I was winding up here with General Agagi, and the end of the story. Wow, I'm all tangled up here in my headset wires. It's quite a seventh inning stretch. Yeah. So the story ends up by saying that the National Guard confirmed the military is initiating personnel actions and separation proceedings to let go of Soswiko, which seems exactly right, and I wonder why it didn't happen last July. And then, of course, I can't help but wondering how hard I need to pat myself on the back, Real Joe Cruz. Wondering if my letter to the Major General Agagi, had anything to do with the decision to tell Josephine, as you were spokesperson, Major Josephine Bloss, to go read the Constitution and not come up with any more malarkey about this innocent until proven guilty stuff in the employment realm. And that's why they decided to let go of this guy who was accused of these crimes. And I, of course, wonder what happened to Jerry Guerrero. So was it just is there no causal relationship at all between my letter and the fact that they've decided to let Soswiko go? And here's where I have to confess errors. I have the letter here, and at the end of the letter, it says, respectfully submitted, Robert Klitzkie. So I put my name on the letter, and I sent it by email to Major General Bloss.
Maybe it would have had no more gravity if it was anonymous.
Exactly, and that's why I said I have to confess error. How stupid can I be to sign it and then actually send it to the person that I think is doing the wrong thing, instead of not signing it and sending it to the media? You know, if I had not signed it and sent it to the media, she would have taken this action long ago. The power of the anonymous letter. Oh, and by the way, when I sent this on July 25, you know how long it took for me to get a response? What's today?
Today's the 29th.
Yeah, so July 25 to November 29, how long is that?
About 4 months.
Yeah, well, it's taken 4 months so far for me to get. I would have expected something like, "Dear Bob, I really don't agree with what you're saying, but I do appreciate that you took the opportunity to comment on this matter for the good of our Guard and our Guardsmen." So that's the first item on today's card. And I guess I learned my lesson. If I'm in this situation again, I won't put my name on the bottom of the letter. No way. I'll just put anonymous, and I'll send it out to the media. Okay, next item on the letter is Marsh, parenthesis, Titano. And I never know exactly how to handle that. I wonder if, if we were to look at the meaning of words, right, Real Joe Cruz?
Yes, sir.
You know what a marsh is, don't you?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
It's a wetland?
Yeah. It's not, it's wetland. And I don't know, do you go tongo no haftamano masang Taitano kifino English?
People of the land?
Without land.
Oh, people without land.
Yeah.
Then how come all the Titanos own all the land?
Yeah. Maybe it was a deception plan. Yeah. So I don't know if Kelly Marsh thinks that she's translating the word marsh, she thinks it means no land.
You might have something there.
Yeah. I don't know. A person who puts a name in parentheses like that, it confuses me. Sometimes I don't even know what her name is. Sometimes I think her name is Marsha Kelly. Anyhow, let's just stick with Marsh for now and forget about the parentheses. Marsh versus Alexander Tytler. Now, you may have never heard of Alexander Fraser Tytler, but you're going to hear him now. He came up with a rather famous quote, and this is what he said. A democracy cannot exist as a permanent form of government. It can only exist until the voters discover that they can vote themselves largesse from the public treasury. From that moment on, the majority always votes for the candidates promising the most benefits from the public treasury, with the result that a democracy always collapses over loose fiscal policy, always followed by a dictatorship. The average age of the world's greatest civilizations has been 200 years. These nations have progressed through this sequence, from bondage to spiritual faith, from spiritual faith to great courage, from courage to liberty, from liberty to abundance, from abundance to selfishness, from selfishness to apathy, from apathy to dependence, from dependence back into bondage. Alexander Tytler. Democracy can only let... Have we seen examples of Tytler's, of Alexander's law here? I think we have. In fact, I think it was just Friday that, or Wednesday, that I was talking about something that really appeals to voters is free stuff. Let's vote for that guy. He'll give us free stuff. Like a free day off after Thanksgiving where we don't have to sign leave, but we get paid. Free stuff. So that brings me to what Kelly Marsh, along with Tina Munya Barnes, Amanda Shelton, Jose Pido Terlahi, Clinton Rigel, and Joe S. San Augustine have come up with. It's Bill 249. Bill 249 says that the legislature finds that the Arts and Public Buildings Law recognizes and defines various forms of art. However, the law is commonly interpreted to only provide inclusion of physical forms of art and public buildings. It is therefore the intent of the legislature to define the term works of art to include the various forms of art which are already recognized and defined in law, so that these forms of art may be included in public buildings in order to fulfill the government of Guam's responsibility. The government of Guam's responsibility to foster culture and arts, and the necessity for the development of the arts, beginning with our young children through our community. Now, I'm going to stop right here. I didn't know that it was the government of Guam's responsibility to foster culture and the arts. And I think you probably already know what I think the government's job is. This is what I'm looking for: an effective, efficient government that provides basic services in accordance with the rule of law on at least a break-even basis. That's the basic stuff: police, fire, probably education, some medicine, etc. Not fostering the arts. I don't see that as a proper role for government. And in most countries in the world, it isn't. Artists, like everybody else, are subject to the economics of the market. If you're a painter and you can sell your paintings, you can make a living as a painter. If you can't, you probably won't. Oftentimes, artists have patrons, rich people who like what they do and will back them with money. But I don't think it's my job to be a patron of the arts and back the arts with my money. So we have a statute that's been on the books that said when we build a public building, we've got to have local art in the building. So we've had that for quite some time. Now we're going to change that a little bit because the next part, here's something else the legislature found. It further finds that the Arts and Public Buildings Law currently prohibits the use of money collected therein for travel. Yeah, you can't use the money for travel. And there was a $400,000 windfall that came from Gita from one of their part of their program that requires companies that get qualifying certificates to pony up money for their slush fund. Yeah, so the legislature finds that the building fund prohibits the use of money collected for travel. However, the legislature also finds that other local programs provide for the travel of individuals representing Guam in such competitions for cultural educational purposes that it would undermine the intent of legislature if money collected by Guam State Arts Agency could not be equitably used to foster the opportunity for participants in the arts and humanities programs and festivals such as Festback. It just wouldn't be fair. You know, if we're going to make these ex gratia payments to other folks, then we should do it for people that want to go to Festback too. Otherwise, it's probably unconstitutional. It's not fair. The festival seeks to halt the erosion of traditional practices through ongoing cultural exchange and to strengthen relationships between the nations of Oceania. It is therefore the intent of the legislature to allow the use of money collected for travel exclusively for Guam's participation and representation in the Festival of Pacific Arts, which has fostered the revitalization of Chamorro culture. Now, as one of the things that have been revitalized is this idea of taking money from some people and giving it to other people for their recreation. Is that part of the Chamorro culture? So, Section 2 of the bill makes CAHA the official lead agency for planning and administering Guam's participation in the FESPAC. And Section 4 reads, no money collected pursuant to this section shall be used for travel. That's how it reads right now. However, there's an amendment, and the period is stricken, and a comma is added, and this language is added, unless the travel is exclusively for Guam's participation and representation in the Festival of Pacific Arts. The money collected pursuant to this section may be used to pay for airfare expenses, for Guam's delegates to FESPAC, shipping expenses for pertinent cargo, and other logistic support as deemed necessary by the governing board of CAHA. So in other words, we're going to take $400,000 and we're going to spend 100 people to Hawaii so they can demonstrate those dances that we've been doing since 1987. I'll come back and finish this up here during the home stretch.
Want to grow your business? Start a new venture? Or stay ahead of the competition? You can. With Docomo Pacific Smart Business Solutions tailored to your specific needs and ambitions, you can do it all. Partner with a network with best-in-class network coverage, state-of-the-art communication platforms, and a team dedicated to providing you with premium support. Call 688-2677 to start your journey to success today. Docomo Pacific Business, delivering your future today.
In life, we all have the ability to make a difference, to make an impact on someone's life. As we look around us, time never stops, but we are filled with endless moments of gratitude. The art of giving is incorporated in so many different ways. At Guam Gift Baskets, we want to be able to express your gratitude and love to those who you care about. Show your appreciation with a gift made with love this holiday season. Visit our website at guamgiftbaskets.com. See the smiles touch their hearts. Feel the experience.
Here we are, home stretch, Tall Tales. That was the call to the post at Churchill Downs, Louisville, Kentucky. We go through this every time. That means, since that was the call to the post, it means I got about 8 minutes before my cough and I can go home. and my cough can enjoy itself at my house instead of on the air, coughing into your ear. So I want to finish up on Marsh versus Alexander Titler. If I can't do it today, I'll do it on Monday. I've got a couple other items on the card: Janela versus Black Friday, and Tello versus the Organic Act that I will do on Monday if I can't finish them up today. And I wanted to just spend a minute or two. I took a peek at the Facebook comments here, and one of the things that I find kind of fascinating is names. So one of the names that pops up occasionally is Paris Mendiola Blas. Now, we all know that Paris is spelled P-E-R-E-Z, right? And I've mentioned on the air before that when you go to the States, you hear people pronouncing that word wrong, Perez. And they will take certain pains. When you say Paris, they will tell you, you're saying that wrong. It's Perez. And, of course, it's not Perez. It wouldn't be Perez in Spanish. It wouldn't be Perez in Chamorro. It's properly pronounced Paris. And the only reason that Perez has become so popular, I think, is because the Paris has got tired of correcting everybody. But then Paris can also be spelled P-A-R-I-S, as in Paris Mendiola Blas, who welcomed me back and said that I sound better. Well, Paris, my cough ought to be sounding better because I have been practicing a lot. But whenever Ray comes across Paris's name, as he goes through his routine of welcoming his Facebookers, he always says, Paris Mendiola will always have Paris, or Paris Blas will always have Paris. Now, for those of you who are not movie buffs from the golden era of movies, that comes from the movie Casablanca, which I hope you've seen, Real Joe Cruz.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So, you know, a lot of good lines came from Casablanca. You played it for her. You could play it for me. Play it, Sam. Play as time goes by. And then in one of the key scenes between Ingrid Bergman and Rick Blaine, where Rick does a complete 180 and actually discards all of his cynicism and becomes an idealist, he says to the Ingrid Bergman character, well, we'll always have Paris. And that's what Ray's shorthand reference back to as time goes by whenever he sees Paris's name. So fortunately or unfortunately, when I see it, that's the first thing that pops into my head. We'll always have Paris. And I'm glad we've got Paris today. So thanks a lot for signing in today, Paris. And then I've also got a post here from Venorica Mateo Blas. And Venorica says, half a day, Robert Wallace. Yeah. Now, you thought I was Robert Klitzkie, didn't you, Real Joe Cruz?
I did.
Yeah, or maybe Bob, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, my middle name is Wallace.
Wow.
Yeah. And my mother explained to me that it was because of some of our ancestors came from Scotland, and Wallace is a fairly common name in Scotland. But I also had, and she said I was not named after my Uncle Wallace, and because I really thought Uncle Wallace was a dork. And I didn't like the name Wallace at all.
So they can call you Bob W. now.
Well, as time went on, you know, my good friends in high school found out that my middle name was Wallace, and that I didn't like it. So guess what I became?
Wallace.
Wallace. Hey, Wally. Hey, there's Wally over there. Hey, Wallace. You know, like the way they call the shortest kid, the tallest kid in class, tiny and stuff like that, you know. Yeah. So that's my story about Wallace. But then there's this movie called Braveheart.
Seen it? Yeah.
Yeah, about William Wallace, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was in Scotland a few years ago, and I took every possible opportunity to show anyone who could see my passport.
Oh, nice.
Because your passport lists your middle name, right?
Yeah.
Wallace, yeah. William Wallace, no doubt. Yeah, right. So much for names. Anyhow, Venorca, glad to see you signing in here. And yes, I am Robert Wallace. Maybe I should have used that as my radio name instead of Klitzkie, huh?
Yeah, that would have been good.
So I'm just wrapping up here. This bill, this Kelly Titano bill, is the classic case of what Tyler's talking about. Sending 100 people to Honolulu to stay in a nice hotel, to have a lot of fun, in effect subsidizing their recreation. Now, you could bet that those 100 people will vote for Kelly Titano from now until the end of time. Oh, yeah, I really like Senator Titano because, FESPAC, she's really supported the culture, and I got a free trip to Honolulu out of it. Yeah. So this is the classic example. Instead of sticking to an effective, efficient government that provides basic services, we got to go about fostering the culture and subsidizing artists and all of these other things, which is a nice thing for the folks that on the receiving end. But what about our hospital? We're not doing anything for our hospital. What about Simon Sanchez High School? What are we doing for Simon Sanchez High School? We brush these things aside. They're not as fun. They're not as much fun. They're not as sexy as sending 100 people to FESPAC. Well, I got a couple topics to pick up on next week. And actually, I think I'll hold off until next month to get back on those other topics. So that's the end of Tall Tales for today. See you next month.